Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Mine. Australia had quite a role to play in the 1969 Apollo 11 moon mission, which saw Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as the first humans to walk on the moon. Australia's role primarily was in the relaying of essential data and broadcast signals back to the United States, largely due to the fact that the Earth is round and it spins, and radio signals can only really be picked up by a receiver that has line of sight to the source. So when Australia was closest, we collected and retransmitted the data. So as a result, there are a few vestiges of the Apollo 11 moon mission still in Australia.
We're a professional unit.
And some of those items are at the Tamworth Regional Astronomy Club. Let's talk moon.
The President of America didn't walk into NASA and say, "Did you guys do moon?"
When the Saturn V is filled up, 150 tonnes, it is the only vehicle which has transported people outside of the low Earth orbit, which is about 400 kilometres up at the space station and all the space shuttles and everything does that. This thing goes, forget all of that, we're going to the moon. Of course, it was Apollo 11 that first put men on the moon, but more than 24 astronauts actually got up there and were involved in the moon landings.
Just briefly, the Apollo missions were Apollo 1, intended to be the first manned mission and a low orbital equipment test, but unfortunately it resulted in a cabin fire during a launch rehearsal that ended the lives of astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White and Roger Chaffee. Pretty horrible story. There were kind of no Apollo 2 and 3 missions. Some people would tell you this was out of respect for the lives lost in the Apollo 1 accident, but in reality it's much more boring than that. It's due to Apollo 1, 2 and 3 being test missions that were basically just run out of order. So Apollo 1 was actually the third Apollo mission and it was followed by Apollo 4. Apollo 4 was the first flight of the Saturn V rocket.
5, 4, we have ignition. All engines are running. We have liftoff. We have liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Apollo 5 was a further test flight which identified some issues that were then resolved and resulted in the Saturn V being rated for manned spaceflight. Apollo 6 was another unmanned Saturn V flight to test the command service module. Apollo 7 was a manned flight to test the command service module in low Earth orbit. It used the smaller Saturn 1B rocket, not the Saturn V.
He's got ignition and he says we're up to thrust on the second stage.
Apollo 8 was the first manned flight of the Saturn V. Apollo 9 was another testing mission in low Earth orbit, specifically to test the lunar module's components. Apollo 10 was a test mission for every component of the moon mission except for landing. They did all the things. They looped around the moon, they could almost reach out and touch the surface, but they came home knowing that their successors would be the ones that went down in history.
Apollo 10, they got there, they had all the equipment, they came right down, ready to land. They could have landed and got out, it was all prepared, but at the last minute they thought we've been so lucky to get so far, we won't take the risk of landing and then finding we can't get off, we'll go back home and tell them that everything worked. So Apollo 10 could have made it.
Apollo 11 really needs no introduction. It was the flight that took Armstrong, Aldrin and Collins to the moon. Armstrong and Aldrin got their feet wet while Collins waited in the car.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil.
The rest is either history or it's your favourite conspiracy theory. Apollo 12 was the first boring research mission, dropping off a number of pieces of scientific equipment, some exploration of Copernicus crater maybe. Apollo 13 was intended to be much of the same, but it didn't quite go to plan.
And number 13 took man further from Earth than ever before. And they were panicking because they'd sailed past the moon, they'd had a major explosion of an oxygen tank on board and they were headed off into nowhere.
Houston, we have a problem.
And unbelievably, the mathematicians and the geotechnicians at the Kennedy Space Centre were able to turn it around and reorient it to come back and make a safe landing on Earth. Those Apollo 13 blokes were the luckiest ever.
Apollo 14 was another science mission, a collection of moon rocks, general exploration, maybe play a bit of golf.
They got more dirt than ball this time. More dirt than ball, here we go again. That looked like a slice to me, Al. There we go.
Apollo 15 was similar, but this time they took a go-kart with them. Apollo 16 planted more scientific equipment, including magnetometers and spectroscopes and fun stuff like that. And Apollo 17 included 5 additional crew members, Phi, Fo, Fom and Fui, who I'm reasonably sure are the only mice to have orbited the moon. Apollo 18 was intended to be an exploration of Copernicus crater, but it didn't happen. And Apollos 19 and 20 were meant to wrap up the Apollo series with an exploration of Hadley Rill and Tycho crater, but those missions were never launched. The remaining components of the Saturn V rockets that were supposed to be Apollo 19 and Apollo 20 are on display at the Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers in the United States. Here's me with the Saturn V that would have been Apollo 19, and here's me with another Saturn V that's cobbled together from test vehicles and spare parts at Huntsville, Alabama.
And the Saturn rocket is just an amazing, amazing thing. The power and the weight of those big motors, they are huge. They are pouring in something like multiple swimming pools volume of kerosene and oxygen every few seconds, burning it to get enough thrust to get the thing off the ground. Once they're in space, of course, it's a different matter. Once they've got that speed up, 20-odd thousand kilometres an hour, the lunar landers and the other components, the service module, which will circle the moon on Apollo 11, piloted by Collins, and then Armstrong and Aldrin, as we know, were the men that came down onto the moon and landed in the lunar lander. The bottom half of that was left behind when they took off. I can't believe it all worked. I cannot believe it all worked. They then hooked up with the service module with Collins. There's Buzz Aldrin's signature there on the Apollo 11. Quite an amazing story.
Journalists and news reporters who covered the launch and subsequent activities of Apollo 11, and indeed all of the NASA missions, were issued with press passes as a form of identification.
And there was an official press pass for Apollo 11 from the Kennedy Space Center, manned Space Flight Center, the Kennedy Center. So there's an official press pass to add to our amazing collection.
We visited Moree, New South Wales, back in this video about Charles Dickens' youngest son, Plornish Marunti-Gunta. Moree is only a couple of hours north of Lightning Ridge, so it's very local, and it blows my mind on a pretty regular basis that the technology used by NASA in the 1960s and 1970s for critical missions like Apollo was so very close to where I grew up in the middle of freaking nowhere, Australia.
Okay, so getting back to the Apollo 11 moon mission, the first radio signals that they were able to send back from the moon to say they were there were accessible only in the southern hemisphere. So it was Australian technology which first picked them up. It was transmitted through Honeysuckle Creek in Canberra, where those signals were first picked up, and the Parkes radio dish, as we all know, was quite famous for recording and hearing those astronauts the first time that they had their feet safely on the moon, one step for mankind and all of that. The signals were then sent from there to Moree, where there was an Earth station, and the satellite link went from there to NASA, where to the whole world that signals were broadcast. So it came through Australia. There were signals sent over to Western Australia, to Carnarvon Space Station there, and they were relayed locally. But the actual moon signals came in to Honeysuckle Creek and Parkes Radio. They were sent, and here's the very equipment that relayed that information via satellite to the United States, where they then broadcast it to the world. We can see the little NASA logo still on that. This equipment was donated from the Moree Earth Station to the Tamworth Sound and Film Archives. And there's not much sound coming out of it, and they don't take films. And when this science centre was set up to focus on the STEM sciences of physics and chemistry and engineering, they felt that these items would be suitable for us. So they certainly take centre of display, and when we have so much stuff relating to the Apollo 11 and the Space Shuttle American programs, it's only fitting that we have the American-owned equipment that was operated in Australia for that Apollo 11 moon landing.
The Moree Earth Station building is still standing today. It's now an irrigation manufacturing facility outside of Moree with some very unusual building architecture. If you'd like to see these incredible items, and if you're this far into this video, I suspect maybe you do, then you should stop by the Tamworth Regional Astronomy Club's facility and display centre. It's extremely worthwhile. You'll be astonished at the quality of the displays and some of the remarkably special items that are part of the TRAC collection. This video was made with the help of the Tamworth Regional Astronomy Club, or TRAC, with special thanks to Warwick Schofield. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Curiosity Mine on YouTube, and maybe even supporting the channel directly via Patreon. You can also follow along on social media using the links in the description. And thank you for watching.